Hey, yo, it's Joe Mo. He's the host of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinals Show. So join the live, hit like and subscribe. Enjoy the podcast tonight. Enjoy the podcast tonight.
What is up? It is Mock Draft Monday. I am back, and I am joined today by Kyle Ledbetter. Now, folks who are part of my community here might know Kyle because he is the producer for Walter Mitchell's Red Rain podcast. So you might know him from that, but he also has his own podcast, the Take It Easy podcast, that I've had the pleasure of being on, but a number of other things he does. So Kyle, introduce yourself to the good folks. Let them know who you are, what you do, how you got here, and what kinds of things you're working on.
Hello, Cardinal Rule. This is Kyle Ledbetter. Joe Camo gave me an excellent introduction there, I will say. He covered all the bases, all the stuff. I am the producer / co-host extraordinaire of the Red Rain podcast with Walter Mitchell on SB Nation. That is the connection between myself and Joe Camo. We've been doing that for 2 years now, and as Joe Camo described it, I'm about Cardinals adjacent at this point. They were not the team I grew up rooting for. I don't live or die with every result, but as of last year, I could name you every player on the team, so I feel like that counts for something. Born and raised in San Diego, you might notice that I've got a certain rooting interest in this college basketball championship game tonight, and now we're living in Sacramento, working some local radio, obviously podcast stuff, and covering the Arizona Cardinals on the side.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have you. You know, we've done a couple handful of podcasts on your show, and always have great conversations. So I was really, looking forward to, having you on here. I have to let everyone know, I woke up today, I was telling Kyle about this, in Texas, because I was at a conference last week, and I was supposed to fly back yesterday, and my flight got canceled, and I got home about 4.5 hours ago. So if I seem tired or out of it, folks, in TCR land, it's because I'm going on 3 hours sleep and jet lagged and all that good stuff. But we're here to talk some Mock Draft Monday, and we're going to have a good time doing that. Let me say hey to some of the folks that are in the chat. We've got Grandizer holding down the chat as he always does. Thank you so much for all that you do, getting the links and everything in here for everyone. We've got Gary Coker, made it just in time. Go Cardinals. Appreciate you being here, Gary. Agent 47 is here. Let's see if we see some mocks with Cards Titans trade. You might just see that. We got Eduardo Bernudo, one of our good members of our community. What's up, folks? Happy Mock Draft Monday. Appreciate you being here. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about some of the news and notes and rumors with the Cardinals as we often do when we're getting started. So let's jump right into it. I like to start with some of the free agent additions that have happened since we last went live. This is sort of a running tally of the players that have been re-signed and then new players that have been brought in. And the players highlighted in yellow are the players that have been signed since our last stream, okay? So that you see that they added Rashad Fenton, a cornerback, and Carlos Watkins, a defensive interior lineman. Now, Watkins, we'll start talking about him first. He most recently was with Dallas Cowboys, has played with Houston. You look at his PFF grades and his snaps, he's always been sort of a rotational player. He's not, a top flight starter. He's more of a depth rotation player. And, going to a new defense, with JG, Jonathan Gannon, and Nick Rouse as defensive coordinator, bring what they did with Philly, which is more of a hybrid defense. They're going to need guys who can play, certain types of fronts. And I think this is probably just a depth signing, just to kind of have a guy in there who's a veteran, just another piece in there. But the player I'm really intrigued by is Rashad Fenton. He's I believe a 6th round pick by the Kansas City Chiefs in 2019. Had 3 really solid seasons. You look at his PFF grades in the 70s, but struggled last year. Was traded to the Falcons for, I think, a conditional 7th round pick. Had a down season last year. But when you have a cornerback like this who had 3 good seasons like that, You look at it and you think, okay, this is a guy who could be at least a solid piece. And, if you've watched my interview with Eric Eager, he talked about cornerback as sort of a weak link position. So if you can get guys like this so that, have a guy with starting experience, that's a really nice thing to have, especially since we lost Byron Murphy Jr. I imagine they're going to bring someone in the draft. So I actually really like this signing, even though he had a rough year in 2022, as a nice veteran depth piece. But I wanted to ask you, Kyle, as someone, again, who is Cardinals adjacent and has some thoughts on the Cardinals, what are your thoughts on what you've seen in terms of the offseason moves with the new coaching staff in place?
Well, obviously, it hasn't been the big move that people were hoping for. I mean, the Cardinals have a lot of money still at their disposal, and Monty Austin-Fort and Jonathan Gannon have been pretty consistent on we're not going to make moves that compromise the long-term positioning of the team. And some of those names on there, LJ Collier is a 1-year deal. Kaiser White, I believe, is a 2-year deal. A lot of these players like Kevin Strong was a flyer pickup. And I think the Fenton signing is interesting when you pair it with some of the other pieces that they've brought in, because obviously you mentioned Byron Murphy is gone. He was their number one corner for most of the season. One of the worst cornerback rooms in the league, I will mention, but he was their top corner for most of the season. And like you alluded to, they will probably be addressing the secondary at points here in the draft. Fenton's interesting because he went from 2 years ago being a bit of a hero type for the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a big game against Buffalo in the 2021 AFC Championship game. And obviously he kind of fell out of the rotation there. They drafted a couple of pieces. Obviously Trent McDuffie was the big first round pick that they brought in, but they've had other pieces in corners who are younger than Fenton. So I was interested by that signing. We'll see what ends up happening in terms of how much he sees the field, or if he'll be one of these players who doesn't make the final roster, but he'll be a training camp invite. I'm interested to see what they do with Fenton specifically.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, they're going to likely draft a cornerback, but that guy might not be ready to contribute right away. Fenton's a guy, if you threw him out there as one of your starters, it's not an elite cornerback room, but it's a guy you feel comfortable with, in my opinion, right? Throwing him out there as a guy as your second cornerback if you need to, especially in the first year of sort of a reset, for this roster. So real quick, Mr. Aaron Van Buren, good friend of mine, has a regular guest host on the show, has given us a super chat for $6.08. So there's probably a significance to that. I'm curious what that is. If Tennessee wants number 3, Arizona should hype it like San Francisco did to Chicago in 17, Trubisky. I'd be happy with the cornerback at 11, but there's always Skronsky, go Cards. So Aaron Van Buren has he worked. I went to school at and was I believe it. I don't know if he worked or was an intern. You can correct me, at Northwestern. So he wants all the Northwestern players. But Skronsky's a great player, so he's been trumpeting that. So thank you, Aaron Van Buren. I'm curious what 608 is, if there's a significance there. I'd love to know, or if it's just random. But Aaron is he's a physical trainer. He knows his stuff, and he played offensive line. So I've always like to hear what he has to say. Real quick, let me say hey to Jude McWhorter. Fenton was a huge pickup. Him and Kazir are our best free pickups in 2 years. And I like the Hernandez pickup as well. Moore's legacy, elite under the radar signings. Yeah, I mean, I think they were never going to be doing the big moves, right? They were going to be looking at, for guys that are going to bring in the culture, guys that are, help. The way I've described it is they're going to want to try to get their draft picks in there as soon as possible. So they're going to sign guys that if you need them to start, they can, but they're not so expensive and so established as players that if the rookies take the starting job, it's going to be a problem, right? So a guy like Fenton, if he starts, okay, that works. If he doesn't end up starting, you didn't spend enough money on him that it's going to be a problem in the locker room. Gary Coker saying Fenton had a hurt ankle last year. That's why he had down here. So that's okay. That could help explain what that was all about, right? So yeah, I like that. Okay, he was an intern at Northwestern University. Okay,
That's
nice.
pretty good.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, if they trade back, Skronsky is a possibility. I like Skronsky. I just don't know if they're going no significant, just going random, just to mess with me up. But thank you for your generosity, Aaron. Yeah, so I think it's some interesting moves, but there's another potential move on the horizon that everyone's been waiting for in terms of DeAndre Hopkins' potential trade, but it's sounding like there might be something. There's rumors of different direction. Uh, so there have been a couple tweets that have gone out. Dov Kleiman, who does kind of an aggregate, he aggregates stories from elsewhere. I try to find something from a source that like Bree or someone like that, but I just didn't find anything that was from one of the more reputable names. But there have nonetheless been rumors and whispers. I know there was a discussion of it on Pat McAfee's show. People talking about whether the Cardinals would release DeAndre Hopkins. And Eric Eager, I'll give him credit. He was talking about this as a possibility a week or two ago. So there've been reports of that, but of course, with everything going on with the trade market and everything, there's a lot of potential for smoke screens. But what are your thoughts on the whole situation with DeAndre Hopkins and then the rumors now that being released might be in the cards for him?
So I have felt that since about early February, maybe around the time that Monty Fort was hired, and you were hearing some leaks about Hopkins and the Cardinals kind of being at an impasse. It seemed to me that Hopkins was not going to be a Cardinal come training camp. And while I thought they were going to be able to move him and maybe absorb some of the salary, but essentially pay what I would say like is $6 million for a draft pick. I know that a rebuilding team, like when Nick Chubb got drafted, that was basically they took on Brock Osweiler's contract, and that pick ended up becoming Chubb, and they paid $17 million for that pick. I thought that the Cardinals would do that given their financial flexibility for one season. And now that it seems like there's not a team that's really interested, and there's not a good match between the money and the team and the draft picks. If they don't find anything, I think after the draft, releasing Hopkins becomes more of a possibility. And I think that given how things have progressed, obviously it could change. I mean, a team could come in and get involved and decide they really want Hopkins, but he's been available for about 6 weeks or so, and no one's really matched the Cardinals price or made the money work. So I think if we get to mid or late May, I think we're going to see a situation where Hopkins probably does get released.
Yeah, and you mentioned the money, and you look at the cap hits, right? The pre June 1st and the post June 1st, and if you're not familiar with how that works, if a player is released or traded after June 1st, the dead cap hit can be split between this year and the next year to kind of reduce the impact of the dead cap and increase the cap savings for this year. And yes, you eventually still have to deal with the cap hit, but when you kick it down the curve a little bit further down the road, a salary cap goes up every year, so it's kind of pushing it, down that way. So there's significant dead cap money. If it's pre June 1st, so anything before the draft would be the pre 6-1, right? Pre June 1st. So you're looking at dead cap of 22 million and cap savings of 8.15 million. If it happens later, right, then there is, and you can designate if it's a release, you can designate a post June 1st hit on that. So they could actually release him earlier, but have that designation. It doesn't work that way with the trade, though. So there's that going on. But I am with Agent 47 here. I mean, I've been paying attention to the stuff, the tweets and the social media reports and the reporting on this whole deal, and a lot of it came from. The initial was reporting was that the Cardinals wanted a first round pick, and then you hear that, okay, well, they want a second round pick and change, and then you hear tweets that teams are waiting for the price to go down, and that they don't think the Cardinals are going to get that. And now you see this, the rumors coming out about the release. I do find it interesting that the rumors of the release are not being circulated by some of the more reputable names out there.
Mhm.
I think this is more smokescreen. I think this is attempts to drive the price down. I think what's going on is the Cardinals do have teams that are interested. They've been kicking the tires. They've been having conversations, but those teams do not want to give up a second round pick plus another pick. They want the price to come down as low as they can get it. And the Cardinals, I think, have been balking at that. And I just think all those tweets, I think all these smoke screens are designed to do that. I really don't see them releasing them. I think someone will trade for him, even if the Cardinals end up not getting the kind of picks they would have liked. Maybe they get a third or fourth round pick instead of a second round pick. But I think it's smoke. We'll see, right? We'll see how it plays out. Gary Coker saying that rumor came from a New England source trying to bring down the value of D-Hop Cardinals so they could try to pick him up for nothing. Cardinals aren't going to release him. David Jimenez, can you foresee the Cardinals restructuring D-Hop's contract, or at least accepting third round draft or later to get something? I'll let you answer that first, Kyle, and then I'll give my thoughts after that.
I could see it because there's a perfect comparison for what's happening right now, and it is a couple of years ago when the Falcons were ready to move on from Julio Jones, and he had a bunch of money on his deal. I believe he had 2 years left on the contract, similar to Hopkins, and ultimately it went past the draft, which was a little unusual. I mean, a player like that, usually you'd want to know whether you're getting the picks now instead of the picks next year, and that ended up going into May, maybe even June. And ultimately, the Falcons got a team that was willing to pay the price that they were asking, which was a second round pick and a fifth round pick for Julio Jones. If it gets past the draft, I think it's more plausible that Hopkins gets released. I would guess, without inside knowledge, that it's probably like 60-40 right now. 60% he gets traded before the draft, 40% that he doesn't, just kind of like following the story a little bit. But that's significantly lower than I would have said a month ago. A month ago, I would have said he would have been traded by now. And I will say that restructuring the contract, less likely. It seems like both sides are kind of headed for an amicable breakup of sorts. And accepting a third round draft pick or later, I think the more likely scenario there is that they do a pick swap, kind of like they get a second rounder, but they have to give up a fifth or a sixth, maybe one of those compensatory picks that they got. I think that's more likely than them accepting a fourth round pick for Hopkins.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Like the restructuring, I don't think happens. That I am at the point where I think Hopkins wants out. We were discussing this before with live. There's some tweets from people who cover the Cardinals who talking about, that they have heard that he does want out. They just can't report it based on, Chuck Harris mentioned in a tweet that he knows Hopkins wants out, but he can't report it officially. And with reporting on stuff like that, if you have sources that are off the record, you have to be careful about that. So there's enough smoke that I think Hopkins really wants out, and I don't think he's not going to restructure for the Cardinals. He'll restructure for someone else, right? Who they trade him to. Accepting a third round pick or later, I could see that happening, but I agree with you, Kyle, that the pick swap is a more likely scenario, right? Get a trade one of those later picks and in return for Hopkins and a pick in the second round or so. Let's see real quick. Let's see. Aaron Van Buren Carter only dropping to 10 visits, top 10 visits is comical. That's an interesting one. We'll come back to that in a second. Let me say hey to CB real quick. Hypothetically, if Tennessee wants to trade with us for number 3 pick, 11th pick in exchange, they do lose out in prospects. So you're talking about the Tennessee. We'll get to that. Oh, but okay. So real quick, this is not Hopkins or Cardinals really, but although he's a player that some people have thought the Cardinals might consider, what do you think about what's going on with Jalen Carter's agent saying that he's only going to accept visits to top 10 teams that are picking the top 10?
So I don't pretend to understand draft logic. I mean, the fact that Laramie Tunsil fell from number 1 pick to 13 pick has always baffled me, and different reasons for falling don't necessarily line up with where my morals or ethics might stand. The
Mhm.
Carter situation is interesting because clearly he was one of the 2 top prospects in January. He was also one of those players who I remember reading a scouting report at 16 years old, a junior in high school. They said
Mhm.
his comparison is Daron Payne and he will be a first round pick. So this is a player who's been identified since he was a child as a future first round pick in the NFL, as close to a can't miss prospect as there is. Some people call them blue chip players, which I think
Mhm.
that phrase might come up a little later on our mock drafts. But as a blue chip type of player, I'm interested to see that. As my draft scout friend Blake Jude has talked about, some teams have just taken him off their board entirely,
Mhm.
which I understand. For those who don't know, Jalen Carter was arrested in connection to he ended up getting charged misdemeanors in relation to a teammate of his and a Georgia staff member dying in a car accident where Carter was apparently racing them or driving his car at high speed on the freeway, and their racing tendencies ended up leading to the death of 2 players, or 1 player and 1 member of the Georgia staff. And then the charges were brought on him at the combine. I believe he left the combine and then came back a day later after being booked in Georgia. And again, it was misdemeanors. He'll serve community service time. It was smaller offenses, nothing connected to the actual deaths themselves that might lead to felonies potentially. And then he had a workout at his pro day, and he did not perform well at all. So it's interesting to see him be taken off boards entirely. Teams don't really want to touch it when we're talking about a talent at that level. I think people have been willing to draft players like that, or at least consider drafting players like that. I know the Cardinals at 3, especially now that 2 quarterbacks are expected to go off at the top of the board, they're not going to be considering Carter. And we mentioned Watkins earlier. I think that signing might indicate that they're looking at other positions now besides defensive tackle.
Yeah. Jordan P is saying, Jalen Carter is by far the best prospect in this draft, but these situations are unfortunate for him. Yeah, I mean, I was of the opinion that he was either going to go in the first round or not get drafted at all. He's not going to slide to the second round or third. If if teams think he's going to be able to play, then he will get drafted, but he's going to probably slide a little bit because teams early on, when you're talking those top 3, 4, 5 picks, they want the cleanest prospect possible. You're very risk averse. Yes, he's the best prospect, but you'll take a guy if he's an A plus prospect. You'll take a guy who's an A minus prospect, who's a cleaner, in terms of the off the field stuff. If you're there, and I'm of the opinion that the Cardinals, for as much as they've been preaching character and everything, I just think they from a PR perspective, if nothing else, they see him as it would be a bad look, to take him. So I think he's going to slide. Um, I think a lot of times, like when agents say things like that, they're very strategic. So if they're saying he's only going to do visits in the top 10, I think you mentioned the Laramie Tunsil situation. I think it's different circumstances, but it's the closest comp we have of a guy who is likely a top 5 pick who, for off the field reasons, slid. And I think that top 10 is strategic because I think the agent probably knows that he's likely to go somewhere between 6 and 15-ish, and is probably trying to push that to keep him in the top 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think that's probably all about. It's all very strategic. We'll see what happens. Jordan P saying there's a recent report he won't get out of the top 10, so we'll see. I think there's a good chance he won't get out of the top 10. I mean, it might be a little bit later. Yeah, he's definitely, like, if he's going to play, someone's going to take him, but it's got to be at that point where the team's like, okay, the value is too good to pass up and we're willing to take the risk, right? So Let me say hey to a couple other folks that dropped in here, then we'll get into the next item. Decimus am saying, I saw the released body cam footage, not a good look. I didn't see that, so I've been out of town for a while, but I'm sure it wasn't a good look. Did you see it, Kyle?
I've seen it on mute. I didn't have the sound up for it.
Okay.
Maybe the sound changes it a little bit. I kind of saw it as like, yeah, it doesn't look good, but it's what I would expect at the scene of someone who ended up fleeing and then coming back after, what would be a car accident that led to the death of two people. It didn't seem anything shocking or jarring to me, but again, I listened to it on mute, so maybe sound changes the effect.
Yeah. And Pete Trepek here mentioned what you talked about. Not sure the best player in the draft shows up 9 pounds heavier at pro day and looked winded. Carter should have been training like a madman since the national title game. Looked like he instead hit every buffet on his way back to Georgia, past work ethic. And, it's tough because I think he has a chance to be a really good player. I mean, a bad pro day doesn't mean he can't get his stuff together. But for a team that's looking for character, that's another bad look, right? So,
yeah, and to clarify the point that I had, the reason he's regarded as top of the class is he's one of those handful of players that from age 15 or 16 onward has been identified as this guy is going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. And usually when I hear that, I'm like, those are the players that I will tend to pick. Last year, I couldn't believe that Kayvon Thibodeau fell to 5 with the New York Giants because people said when he was a senior in high school, he'll be the number 1 pick in the draft. When he was a freshman at Oregon, he'll be the number 1 pick. When he was a sophomore, he'll be the number 1 pick. And it felt like right around the draft, he started sliding a couple spots. So, he's one of those handful of players that everyone tells me is a can't miss kind of player.
Yeah. And, you follow sports enough and different fan bases enough and are part of a couple maybe snake bitten fan bases. You understand fans, right? San Diego Chargers fans can be traumatized by and just have long memories of bad situations. And for a lot of Cardinals fans, this is shades of Robert Nkemdiche, right? A talented interior defensive lineman. Nkemdiche wasn't quite at the level of Carter. He was probably, without the off the field questions, he was probably a more pick 15 to 17 kind of a guy ish. And the Cardinals got him late in the first round, but nonetheless, a talented interior defensive lineman with questions off the field. Cardinals fans are going to be leery of that, because of that history. Rafael Castillo, thanks for dropping in. Seattle will take him, and we will be dealing with a 20-year-old Chris Jones twice a year for a very long time. Just saying that might happen. Well, yeah. I mean, we'll see, right? So
for every Robert Nkemdiche, there's a Jeffrey Simons. So, who knows what'll end up happening there.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, right? JP, thanks for being here. Tyree is no-go for me too. You're not a Tyree Wilson fan. I know we have a love-hate relationship with Tyree Wilson here. Mostly hate. Most of the fans don't want them to take him. But so okay, let's get into the mock draft. So now I mentioned when we went live, I was at a conference all week. My flight was canceled. I woke up in Texas this morning, so I didn't do a player profile, just, kind of behind on everything, trying to get caught up. I hope you all bear with me, but we are going to look at mock drafts, and Kyle has prepared a mock draft for the Arizona Cardinals, and we're going to start with that. Kyle, let us know, what were your thought processes as you went through these picks?
So the first thing was I didn't want to make any trades. I know it's possible that something could come in, but it's so unpredictable and so difficult to figure out that I decided for the time being, let's just stick with the picks that the Cardinals have. Obviously, this will change in 1 or 2 places as we get closer to the draft. Hopefully, this podcast ages a little bit better. That it won't come up on Wednesday that they've traded the number 3 pick. I recognize it's very likely that they won't be holding on to the 3 pick. But while we're here, I'll advocate for, if you believe that Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson or Miles Murphy or whoever it is, obviously I went with Will Anderson as the number 3 pick. If you believe that person is your Myles Garrett, or you believe that that person is your Nick Bosa at the top of the draft, a can't miss edge rushing prospect. If not a surefire Hall of Famer, he's going to be in the what I call the Hall of Very Good, basically guaranteed 15 years of being an incredible player. If you believe that that player is that, there's no amount of picks and players you could trade me that will get me out of that position. Seeing what a top end edge rusher or a top end interior guy does in changing the fortunes of your team, that's what everyone tries to hit on, I think, in the draft. And while it's nice to have hits at the board, and people talk about Moneyball and the analytics revolution being like, you get as many shots at the board and you can find talent within the margins. It is the easiest way to rebuild a football team is to land the number one pick in a year that has a generational talent. This has been true since the 80s. It continues to be true now. If you get a generational talent at the top of the draft, it is the fastest way to turn around your franchise. Think Trevor Lawrence with the Jaguars recently. We could go back to Myles Garrett with Cleveland. We could go back to Andrew Luck with the Colts, all the way back to Cam Newton in Carolina. If you get that guy, it will change the fortunes of your franchise. And if Arizona believes that Will Anderson is that guy and he will be their Nick Bosa, getting 15 sacks a year for 5 seasons, there's no reason to trade out of that pick and go lower in the draft.
Okay. I'm in the trade back group.
Yes.
I think, I mean, Will Anderson is a great player. Would love to have him. I think there are other edge rushers that could be double digit edge rushers that you can get and then still get a couple other stars. But I hear the argument. For me, if it's a quarterback, take that quarterback early. If you don't need a quarterback and there are quarterbacks on the board and teams that want to trade up, for me, I'm a trade back person. But listen, this is a subjective exercise, right? I
agree with you in terms of the long-term solution. The Cardinals are years away from winning, and if you don't believe Will Anderson is that guy, trade back 100%. I am with you on that. I'm saying in this scenario where they pick 3, I don't want to be like, oh, how could you squander this value or whatever it is.
Well, we are not one player away. I'll say that. So, okay, but I like Will Anderson, so I'm never going to tell someone that's a bad pick at 3. If you're not trading back, that's the only person that I'm taking at 3. There's no one else I'm willing to take at 3 in the Cardinal situation. So tell us about your other picks and your thought process in them.
Absolutely. Also, I'll shout out Ryan Lindsay in the chat who says, am I the only one who thinks people overuse the term generational talent every year? And
I agree. I think that term's overused as well.
I agree. And my solution to it is if the physical prime of players is 5 years, your generation is 5 years. It's not like a generation is 10 or 20 years. A generation is the physical prime of the player, which in football might even be 4 years. So each generation in football might only be 4 years. So that's my compromise on that one. When saying it's a generational talent, let's say that if Will Anderson is the best edge rusher in the draft since Nick Bosa, let's say that, then we're talking about a generational talent.
I like blue chip talent. I think that just is, it's still a little cliche, but at least the generation, like you said, what's that mean? Is because sometimes we have 3 generational players, quote, quote, come up, back to back to back, but blue chip doesn't limit it in terms of how many, but it just says that's that top shelf player, right? So, but you went Deonte Banks at 34, right?
Yes.
So nice cornerback. So the one that I think some folks are questioning, and I have to admit I'm questioning, is pick 66. Good draft. Not sure if we need a safety.
So there will be a very personal reason for why 66 comes in. First to 34 with Deonte Banks. Blake Jude, who is a Cincinnati Bengals guy, Stripe Hype Cincy, he scouts 150 something players every year. He has Deonte Banks as a first-round corner. One of the nice things about having a bad season is that you get first-round talents at second-round prices. And Deonte Banks fits the match of one of these players. He happened to be available in this mock draft that I created. So Deonte Banks would be the pick at 34. If they get him, excellent. Cam Smith is another great guy from South Carolina. The thing that's important is address the secondary. We came into this, we are addressing the secondary for the Cardinals. Now, JL Skinner, there's a personal reason I will get to in a second for why I picked JL Skinner, but just from a football standpoint, I know he's listed as a safety. He is an undersized safety that will play some more like hybrid nickel linebacker as well. So I think that might even be his ideal fit going forward in the NFL as a nickel package linebacker, someone who is working zone defenses in space, but he'll play some safety. Obviously, he's better in the middle of the field than as a true drop back safety. And I think with Budda Baker, there can be some interesting packages that the Cardinals put together. For those wondering, he's about 6'4", a little over 200 pounds. So a little bit of an undersized safety, more of like a hybrid linebacker role. If you think about what Jamal Adams does outside of rushing the passer, JL's not really going to be rushing the passer as much, but he'll be someone who operates kind of middle of the field space. The reason I put him in this mock draft, and the reason is very specific, JL Skinner is a graduate of Point Loma High School class of 2019. I am a graduate of Point Loma High School class of 2019. JL Skinner and I, we used to do workouts together in middle school, and he was the star of our high school football team, and I wanted to give JL a shout out. And while it's not the top match for Arizona, this guy's a second round talent. The reason he's going to fall in the draft is because he had a pec injury at the end of his last season. He's a second round, and even in some mock drafts, I've seen him as a first round guy who is going to fall to the third round because of injuries at the end. So JL is a really, really good player. I'm going to advocate for him because he is an old friend of mine. I haven't talked to him in years, so no, I can't bring him on the Cardinal rule or anything like that. But I had to give JL a shout out.
Okay. So I can appreciate that. Oh, here we go. No, not hybrid safeties. No more Dalen Buchanan's. But listen, I appreciate it. Real quick, I would say hey to Jason for the super chat. Thank you so much. Hey, Joe, nice to see you, bud. Please continue to do great work, and I'll support no matter what. Trade down thoughts, D-Hop thoughts. Thank you, Jason. You're always so kind and generous with your support. We talked about earlier, for me, trade down. Kyle, it's like, well, if you're not sold on Will Anderson is that guy who can put you over the top, then go ahead. D-Hop, we talked about that earlier. I think there's a lot of smoke screens, but I think he's going to be traded. Kyle thinks maybe 40% likelihood he gets released, right? So, but thank you, Jason, so much. Okay, so we'll give you a pass on, JL Skinner. You had some people, kind of taking shots. Kev was very generous and kind. That draft sucks. But I think
I understand.
folks, trade down. Okay, so Michael Evans, thanks for being here, is for about trading down. So, okay. Who did this crazy draft? Mike, I'll be kind. This is, if you know Kyle, though, he likes to mix it up. So,
yeah, we had to get some blends here. We said at the beginning, I'm not going to do trade downs because it's just way too difficult to predict. I do like the A.T. Perry pick at 66 in terms of a prospect. Andrew Bradford brought that up.
100%.
I've personally been someone who says Cardinals don't draft a wide receiver. There's so many other needs, and even if you're not doing need, JL Skinner's a best player available pick at 66. So just, you don't need a receiver. I know Hopkins might be on the way out. Just give Rondale Moore a chance. You don't need another receiver at this point. So I would prioritize other positions, and that begins with Ricky Stromberg there at 96 because I know you're a big John Michael Schmitz guy. You have serenaded him at this point, and I had the option sitting there at 34. For those who don't know, Ricky Stromberg is second in terms of athleticism grades at the combine, only behind our friend John Michael Schmitz. So if they pick him up in the fourth round, this is a courtesy of NFL.com and their scouting. I don't think it was Daniel Jeremiah. I think it was someone else, but someone who works for NFL Network brought that up. And Stromberg, I think, is either the third or fourth graded center in this class. I think Wyatt Davis for Ohio State is kind of a guard center hybrid who's higher than him. But if they can get Stromberg at the top of the fourth round, I think that would be a fantastic move by the Cardinals. And you might miss out on John Michael Schmitz, but I think getting Deonte Banks at 34 and Ricky Stromberg at 96 would be a nice little combination.
Okay, interesting. So when I did looking at offensive linemen, Ricky Stromberg didn't make my list of scheme fits, and I think part of it, and I'm trying to remember, I think one of the scouting reports I saw didn't have him necessarily as good picking up blocks, but there's a lot of different reports out there, so it's hard to know, so maybe he would be an interesting fit. And, I'm of the opinion that Monty Ossenfort is going to identify some offensive linemen he likes, and he's going to take a couple of them late, whether they're the guys I think they are or not. So while Stromberg might not be the center I would go with, it wouldn't shock me if, Monty Ossenfort went in a different direction than I think. So we need a center. You posed a good argument for why he could be that guy. So, sure, I'll buy it. Okay. So
I did see some JL Skinner love in the chat from Drew. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you supporting my guy. Point Loma High School stand up. The Cardinals would love to have him, even if he's not a perfect fit right now. I think that would be a good one. And I think the other ones, positions of need, top players at their position. I think the rest of them makes sense for the Cardinals.
Yeah, Ryan likes it, right? Yep. So he's really great at run blocking. So it'd be interesting to see. Okay, so Zach Pickens, defensive tackle, South Carolina.
Yeah. Not a ton on him. I mean, he's a 6'4", 310-pound interior guy. So obviously it would be nice. He would be under contract for 4 years. I like Lecky Fotu. I just don't think that he's a long-term option at that nose tackle interior. So I think, Zach, if you correct me, Zach Allen was a 3rd-round pick for the Cardinals years ago.
Out of Boston College. Yeah.
Pickens is obviously a 4th-round guy, more of a true defensive interior player, but it seems like if Allen goes out the door, let's just slide Pickens in and kind of start the process all over again.
I think they had a meeting with Pickens, if I'm not mistaken, at whether it be at the combine or somewhere. So he's on their radar, I think. Jordan P does a lot of watches a lot of film on players, and he says that he flashes. His issue is consistency. So interesting. So yeah, I think they need to go some defensive interior line help. So definitely like getting a guy there. So then you've got another cornerback in Garrett Williams, who I believe is recovering from an ACL injury, but has some nice skills. So what was your rationale for going 2 cornerbacks?
Well, we got to address the secondary. That is most important. On a poor team last year, the secondary was their worst position group in the league, if not last, second to last, or third to last in the league. So you can't have enough corners at this point for the Cardinals. And Garrett Williams, you mentioned the injury. He is a 3rd-round prospect who is probably going to fall a little bit because of the injury. I know the Cardinals met with him at the combine. I was surprised, Jordan P, as well, that he fell that far in the mock draft that I did and made him available. So the Cardinals have met with him. They seem to at least have some level of interest in Williams. And if he's not ready to go immediately, that'll be okay, because they are doubling up on corner in this mock. We mentioned Rashad Fenton got signed earlier. He might make the team coming out of camp, and eventually Williams will slide in as a backup corner to start. He's not going to start right away. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, there's an opportunity that opens for him. But at this point, it's better to have depth than having to go to either the waiver wire or last year they made the trade with the Raiders for the player whose name I'm blanking on right now.
Trayvon Mullen.
Thank you. Yes, Trayvon Mullen. So I like Williams there. Add some depth. Won't play right away, and he's a 3rd-round prospect that they get in the 5th round in this mock draft.
Interesting. I think if they go 2 corners, one of them is going to be more of a slot corner. That I think. So that would be the one thing I'd maybe say. Garrett Williams, Jordan P. saying, has been comped to Devin Witherspoon, just not as physical. That's a really nice comp. Mizaki Felix, thanks for being here. I'm glad he mentioned pectoral injury. I'm glad he mentioned the pectoral injury. Okay. Yeah.
I'm guessing that's for JL Skinner. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. For So yeah, I mean, I like Williams as a prospect. Like his scouting profiles talk about some of the things he does well in terms of mirroring guys in man coverage and things like that. Then you've got Antonio Mafi, offensive guard from UCLA. I like him as a prospect. What were your thoughts on him?
Just a big physical interior guy. Obviously, they don't have an opening right now in terms of like a starter, but as we are aware of, the Cardinals had I think like 10 different offensive line combinations
Mhm.
last year, so there's obviously plenty of opportunities. Cody Ford's no longer on the team, I believe.
No, he
So
signed somewhere else. Yeah.
yeah, so they have needs in depth positions. Also, I know I took Stromberg earlier, and he's more of a true center than anything else. But the Cardinals kind of need players who can play multiple positions. I think Mafi's gonna kind of be that guy.
Mm.
Ideally as a guard, but can play some tackle. Might even slide in at center if they need to, but. I think right guard is more of the ideal position. I didn't do deep scouting on Mafi, but I believe right guard is his ideal position right
Yeah.
now.
Will Hernandez is going to be playing right guard, and it's the tough part is there is a job up for grabs at left guard. So, but Mafi could I think he has played there too. But
Yeah.
yeah, Mafi, I like him a lot. He's for the wide zone, he's not quite as mobile, in terms of pulling as you'd like. I mean, they could make it work, um, but yeah, but I like him a lot as a prospect. Um, Pete Trepak's asking, who are the Cards cornerbacks besides Antonio Hamilton and Marco Wilson? Well, Rashad Fenton, a guy they just signed this last week, who started a good bit, and then Christian Matthew, the guy that they drafted in the 6th round, 7th round last
I
year
think it was
out
a
of
seventh rounder last year.
yeah, that's right, out of Valdosta State, and then we have a couple other guys that are like bubble guys, practice squad guys. So they'll probably keep 5 cornerbacks, I'm guessing. So, you got room for 1 or 2 more potentially, right? So, and then you've got Yaya Diaby, and I think Aaron Van Buren was saying we'd only need Divine Diablo from Raiders to pair with Diaby, and then we'd have quite an interesting combination of names there. So tell us a little bit about Yaya Diaby.
Diaby was an interesting player at the end because obviously they took Will Anderson earlier and they have Myjai Sanders and they have Cam Thomas. They are really prioritizing their edge rusher linebacker combo. I know Diaby's listed as an edge. He'd probably fit in more as a true outside linebacker in the Cardinals system. Kind of a depth piece again. Hopefully would make the team, maybe more of a practice squad candidate out the gate. But at that point, it was kind of just top prospect. And my buddy Blake Jude, I believe, has Diaby as a 4th round prospect.
Okay.
So some people have different between 4th, 5th, and 6th, kind of a day 3 guy. And if he's
Right.
sitting there in the 7th round, it's kind of just add a depth piece, take a flyer, see if someone like Diaby could one day be an impact player for the Cardinals.
Nice. Okay. I mean, I like a lot of the players you've got on here. Obviously, Will Anderson, you love that. I like Deontay Banks at cornerback. Love Garrett Williams where you got him. I like Mafe. Maybe I don't see him as a great scheme fit for the wide zone, but I like him as a player. Getting a center, even if it's not the one I get. Maybe the one thing that I think, and I know a lot of people talk about receiver. You argue they won't get they probably won't get a receiver, and I could see that with Zach Pascal added. Maybe they don't. I think they're going to focus on offensive line and defense, and then upgrade the weapons next year probably. But I could see him going receiver, but Pascal being signed maybe reduces likelihood. Maybe the one thing that I actually feel like is missing is a running back. I think they need to get a running back somewhere early day 3 to kind of add to that running back room with James Conner. So maybe, that'd be one thing I'd go different if it's me, but yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand that. There's a lot of great guys up there
Yeah.
as well in the running back draft. I know Gray from Oklahoma has been connected. The player from Tulane, whose name I'm blanking on, has been connected to the Cardinals. Running back was something that just kind of got lost at the end for me. I'd like maybe that 7th round pick goes to a running back instead of Diaby because obviously
Yeah.
they take Anderson in this draft, and I don't know whether they will or won't take a receiver in the draft. I would articulate for if it were me making the decisions, I would not draft a receiver at this point. Uh, Spears is the running back from Tulane. Thank you, Jordan P. in the chat for helping me out there. I would go for I would be okay taking a running back. I like Keontae Ingram. It doesn't seem like the new regime is necessarily as big on Ingram, so maybe he's kind of a candidate to fall out of maybe he doesn't even make the team at this point. So I would be okay giving Ingram a try as the third string guy. It's not the end of the world if they don't add a running back. It's just I agree with you. I think fifth, maybe that pick 168 ends up being a running back.
I mean, obviously the JL Skinner pick was more, you wanted to, give some love to your guy out there. So maybe if you were doing this without that as kind of a motivation, maybe that 66th pick might have been another cornerback, and then maybe you go running back where you went Garrett Williams, maybe something like that. But yeah, okay. Real quick, got a couple other comments I want to say hey to some folks who dropped in here. Daniel Corriard, I hope the Cardinals take Anderson at 3, knowing the Cardinals, they will trade down. They know the majority of the fans want Anderson, so they won't take Daniel's. We've had a lot of conversations in the chats. He definitely felt like, he was talking about the pass rush being an issue, and it ended up being something that they really struggled with. So he liked to see him take a pass rush, but he's a long suffering fan, so he's maybe a little jaded. But no, listen. Maybe there's a few picks here and there we'll quibble with, but like you clearly know what positions the Cardinals need to look at, so I think you did your homework, Kyle. Good job overall. Yeah. Oh, you're getting some love in the chat. Go UConn.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Here, I'll put the hat back on.
Just so people know.
I did not go to San Diego State, but I grew up 5 minutes away from the campus. I used to be able to name every player on their team, but I'm not a big college basketball person anymore. If it weren't San Diego playing in it, I would be totally fine just doing this mock draft with Joe and then waking up tomorrow to find out the result.
Right. Well, listen, hey, you got to represent. So listen, Jordan P. and I this is kind of where I lean. Like there's guys like BJ Ojulari. He's not Will Anderson, but he's a really good pass rusher, and you might be able to get him at number 34. So if you trade back and you get BJ Ojulari at 34, and then a multitude of picks for that number 3 pick, and end up getting maybe 2 to 3 other starters who are plus starters, and then you go with Ojulari as the edge rusher. That's where I kind of look at. But I get it. There's a lot of different arguments. Okay. Well, what we're going to do now is I'm going to take my chance or my shot at a San Diego Charger or LA Chargers, formerly San Diego Chargers draft. Sorry, not to rub it in.
Should be
right?
San Diego.
Should be San Diego. I'm gonna take my chance, my shot at a Chargers draft, and this will be your chance to tell me how clueless I am, right? So to kind of get back at me. So here is what I came up with. Okay, I started by looking at the roster and look at what I thought were some of the needs, and I felt like two of the biggest needs I saw, in my opinion, was a starting guard. You drafted Kenyon Green last year, but you need someone to play next to him or across from him. And then a safety. You have to see, Derwin James, but I think you need another safety out there who's a starting caliber. So I started, I went with Osiris Torrance, arguably the best guard in the draft. And if Skronsky's a guard, then Skronsky's probably the best guard in the draft. But Osiris Torrance, really good. I don't typically pick him for the Cardinals because I don't think he's an ideal fit for the wide zone. But I think for your offense, he might be a little bit better fit, more of an inside zone and power run. So I went with Torrance there in the first round. Maybe I went a little high for him, but I still nonetheless went with that. Then I got you one of the better safeties in the second round to get you a starter in Sidney Brown at safety. And then when we got to third round, I got you some cornerback depth. You have some nice cornerbacks there, but I thought you could use maybe an outside cornerback to develop to be a true number 1 there. You've got some guys who are serviceable, but I thought you could maybe use a potential eventual upgrade. And then I got you a halfback, back-to-back Syracuse player, Sean Tucker. Obviously, there's some questions about whether you'll be losing Eckler or not. So figure you need a stable running back. So even if you don't lose Eckler, having another guy to get in that room isn't a bad thing in the 4th round. I thought you could use some depth at edge. You have really good starting edge rushers, but Jose Ramirez on day 3 is a really intriguing guy. I think led the country in sacks with a small program. He's a guy a lot of people intrigued at. So I thought get him as a developmental depth guy. And then I thought, maybe a little bit of depth at receiver with Ronnie Bell. You've got some good receivers, but thought maybe just someone, to be your 4th receiver there. And then you've got a lot of interior defensive linemen. None of them seem to be really elite. It just seems like a lot of okay guys. And not that Cameron Young is that guy, but I thought I'd get you another guy in there to develop, see what he could be. That was kind of mainly the positions I thought that you needed. There may be a few other places I thought the Chargers could use backups, but I tried to prioritize the places I thought you needed starters quickly, guard and safety, and then kind of filled out the rest from there. So, Kyle, do I have a clue about the Chargers?
Well, here's the good news.
Okay.
If you don't have a clue about the Chargers, neither do the people making the decisions for the Chargers.
Okay. So I'm no worse than the people who actually make the decisions for the Chargers.
You're no worse than the actual decision makers for the Chargers.
Okay.
Dean Spanos. One of my favorite things every year is when people say, like, we can be the 49ers. We can be the Eagles. We can build a team with star players across the board and have a rookie quarterback making $900,000 a year. And I'm like, but you're the Chargers. You're not going to be able to pull that off. You're not as smart as Howie Roseman and John Lynch and those teams. So the Chargers are kind of one of those teams. I think they started the offseason with like -$7 million in cap space or something like that. The Khalil Mack move didn't work last year. The JC Jackson signing was rough. They are about to extend Justin Herbert, even though our buddy Moore's Legacy in the chat says trade Herbert and restart, which the Chargers, one thing they always do have is a quarterback, and they know when they've got a quarterback, you gotta hang on to that. So Osiris Torrance would be an interesting 2nd round guy. I don't think he's probably a 1st rounder, but then again, Cole Strange got picked in the 1st round last year, and it's a very similar type of positional need pick type.
I reached a little bit on that one. I definitely acknowledge that for sure. I didn't think he'd be there at 54, and he wouldn't have been. So yeah, absolutely understand that. The Chargers might decide that they have some needs there instead of going best player available. I like Sidney Brown, even though they gave you a C- for it. I like that pick from Illinois coming in at safety. I like Nasir Adderley. I just recognize the limitations of his game at this point. And, hopefully Sidney Brown slides in there better. People, if anyone in here who is making fun of me for picking JL Skinner is going to be against Sidney Brown, I just want to say we're missing the ball here. I think their issue for the Cardinals is they feel like our safeties are strong. One of the strong parts of between Buddha and Jalen Thompson, we have pretty good set of safeties. So it wasn't the player as much as the position for what.
Absolutely, and hopefully I articulated kind of a hybrid linebacker.
Yeah, right.
Type player,
which we love from our damn Buchanan days.
So Garrett Wilson obviously had him picked to the Cardinals in the 5th round. If the Chargers get him in the 3rd, that's an A pick. So obviously, big win there. I could see the Chargers picking from that group of corners in the 1st round. I know you mentioned that obviously they've got some guys there. Asante Samuel Jr. is a star in the making for the Chargers as a 2nd round guy, I think 2 years ago. Obviously there's kind of a gluttony of corners in the back end of the 1st round, whether it's Joey Porter Jr., whether it's Cam Smith. We mentioned Banks from Maryland going to the Cardinals in our mock draft. So I could even see them going higher on the corner. Running back, we'll pause on that until we get to my mock draft.
Okay.
Edge rusher, like the move there. And then Cam Young, defensive, just real quickly on the defensive interior. So the Chargers in 2021 had the worst rushing defense in the NFL in, I believe, like 15 years or something.
Oof.
And then last year they were 31st in the NFL in rushing defense. Only the New York Giants were worse than them in the league. And we saw what happened when the Giants played the Eagles in the playoffs last year, where the Eagles ran for basically 40 points in about 3 quarters. So Chargers definitely need some help on the interior. They just need to find a way to stop the running, and they just haven't been able to figure it out over the past 2 or 3 seasons. The receiver thing is interesting because I've seen a lot of people mocking Jordan Addison in the first round to the Chargers. I've seen people hoping that Jackson Smith and Jigba falls to them at 21 or something like that. Like, I've seen receivers going to the Chargers at the top. And what's interesting about that is they have 2 receivers, obviously, in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They're paying top 12 money for both players. So it's nice to have a true number 1 and a guy who's like a fringe number 1. If you're paying them both wide receiver 1 money, you're not really getting value at the position. Yeah. And so I understand people who say, well, they'll move on from one of the 2 and draft a receiver. I understand the arguments for it. It's the one thing I can say the Chargers have a strength in is their top 2 receivers. And if you're going to draft a 3rd round, or if you're going to draft a number 3 receiver to kind of replace Joshua Palmer, Ronnie Bell makes sense in the 6th round. Or when we get to my mock draft, I'll have another guy kind of around the same place for the Chargers at receiver. So as much as you wanted me to come here and dump on your mock draft, it is the Chargers would be a better team walking out of this with this mock draft. So will it get them over Kansas City? No, but I don't think there's anything the Chargers can do to get over Kansas City.
Okay, nice. Well, I appreciate. Well, okay, now Moore's Legacy says Joshua Palmer slander will not be tolerated.
I have no qualms against Joshua Palmer. He is a number 3 receiver, and actually, yeah, I think he's their number 3 receiver at this point. I think so, yeah. I think the only other receiver on their team is a guy named Keelan Doss, who probably doesn't mean anything to anyone unless you saw Hard Knocks a few years ago with the Raiders. He's a UC Davis guy. I'm a UC Davis graduate, so just want to point out, I hope Keelan Doss makes the Chargers this year, and if that means they don't draft a receiver in the draft, I will be all for that. If it means that Keelan Doss can be the number 5 for the Chargers.
Nice. Now, someone asked, is Everett still there? I thought Everett was still there. Is he gone? He was.
Let me double check. He is still there, and Donald Parham Jr. is still there as a backup.
So yeah, Parham's a nice kind of big, 6'8" kind of red zone target. So I didn't. Tight end, I didn't see as a need for them because it looked to me like Everett was still there. So, but Ryan here's saying, what about tight end for Chargers like Kincaid or Mayer? So, I mean, I guess if you want to add some receiving threat, you could get another guy, but
if you're gonna pick a tight end, this is the year to pick a tight end, though. That's true. Because there are 4 first-round guys, according to my buddy Blake Jew. There are 4 guys who could be justified being drafted in the first round or high second-round players. So there is a gluttony of tight ends this year.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. Okay, so I didn't do terrible, so that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you show me how it's done? All right. Let's look at your Chargers mock draft. Tell me what you did here and why you did it.
Okay, so in this mock draft, Bijan Robinson fell to 21. And there's 2 things we should acknowledge here. One, this would mean Austin Eckler is going to get the trade that he's looking for. I think Austin Eckler is probably going to be in that $10.5 to $11 million range, similar to where the franchise tag is this year. So I think Eckler will eventually get that. Now, if I were the Jets, I would have taken the money I gave to Lazard and given it to Eckler instead. I know they have Breece Hall, but Eckler's a versatile back that would have worked great for them. I know there's like an Aaron Rodgers connection for why they didn't do that, but I would have gone ahead and done it. Tampa makes a lot of sense. The Bears make a lot of sense for Eckler. I think Eckler is going to get the trade and the money that he's looking for from someone. I just don't know who that team is. The reason I put Bijan at 21 is any team after 12 pick Bijan Robinson. I think the teams in there are like the Patriots, the Texans, the even everyone except the Steelers, because the Steelers have Najee Harris, but Washington, Tampa, everybody in that group. Seattle is in that group. I know they have Kenneth Walker. Anyone in that group, take Bijan Robinson. My buddy Blake Jude says that there are 3 blue chip guys in this year's draft. It is Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, obviously we talked about him earlier, and Bijan Robinson. He is the best running back prospect he's ever scouted, which goes back to Saquon Barkley. He is going to be a top 15 pick in the draft. I think a team will trade up into the top 15 to make sure that they get him in this mock draft. That obviously didn't happen. Bijan Robinson is the best offensive player in this class, and I know running back is a very specialized position, and everyone recognizes that they can be dime a dozen type players, and maybe they're not the most long-term sustainable picks. If I'm the Chargers, I am taking Bijan Robinson, pairing him with Justin Herbert, and if I'm any of those teams in the 12 to 21 range, draft Bijan Robinson if he is available.
Aaron Van Buren agrees with you. He's taken shots at those of us who strategically do not believe in taking running back. I'm not scared. I ain't scared. It's not fear, but roster building strategy wise, value wise, I just don't believe in drafting running backs in the first round. And, I'm just kind of, if you won the Super Bowl and you're picking 32nd and you just want to add a running back, but then the Chiefs did that with, Hilaire, and he didn't, what's his name?
Clyde Edwards-Hilaire.
There were Edwards-Hilaire. And I get Bijan Robinson is great. And it's not even that. It's just running backs. Sometimes those great running backs, like year 4, they're done. Year 5, they're done. Mm-hmm. So my philosophy is build an offensive line that's really good and then draft running backs later. It's not a fear thing. It's just a value-based roster building thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm never going to do that, but I don't doubt the talent, right? So
it is absolutely a fair assessment. And I understand the avoiding a running back because Pacheco was the star running back for Kansas City. It was McKinnon and years before that it was Darrell Williams. Like, I totally understand. The key difference I will say is Bijan's no Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. This is a special type of talent. And if you're going to pick a running back, this is the one. And I think the Chargers are a good fit compared to some other teams because Tampa's going to be bad for a couple of years. And picking a running back is not their biggest need right now. Obviously, the Chargers have holes at multiple offensive line positions, but they do have 2 studs in Corey Lindsey at center and Rashawn Slater at left tackle. So they have 2 all-pro caliber players in addition to having some holes at the other offensive line positions. So,
and I didn't mean to, and I'm sure you didn't think I meant this. I didn't mean to suggest he's not going to be better than Edwards-Hilaire. I think like you look like even Adrian Peterson, right? As a first round running back, he was great. But for me, it's like, when, how often does a team that is built around a heavy investment in a running back win a Super Bowl? Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I look at it. But again, great player. So your running game would be, Eckler's really good. So I'm not going to say would be much better, but I think it would be improved. So.
And they would get something for Eckler. I'm not sure what. Maybe it's a Hopkins trade where they get a pick swap between like a 6th and a 2nd or something, but they'll get something for Eckler in a trade.
Yeah. But if you talked about your defensive line and the run, I love your 2nd round pick.
With Mozzie Smith as a defensive run stopper for the Chargers, which is a very high priority. If Bijan hadn't been there at 21, I would have contemplated picking Brian Breesy. Robert Moore, excellent. Bijan, we're going to say generational talent again. He's the best running back since Saquon Barkley, so I think we can say generational running back talent for Bijan Robinson.
Right.
If it weren't for Bijan being there, I think Brian Breesy from Clemson would have been a great pick for the Chargers at 21.
I consider that in mind. Well. I was looking at that in mind. Yeah.
I think that's a great pickup. And by the way, if he falls to the 2nd round and Banks, who I had in my Cardinals mock draft, is gone by 34, Brian Breesy makes a lot of sense for the Cardinals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
no, for sure. Yeah. So good.
Mozzie Smith is either the second or third best guy. I think he's kind of in that territory where he's kind of like a high second round prospect. But my buddy Blake Jude, who I mentioned a couple times, I trust his prognostication on draft stuff a lot. He scouts 150, 200 players a year. He said what's unique about this year's class is that between prospects 20 and 50, there's kind of not a lot of difference compared to other years. Like the 20 to 50 guys, you could justify going at the top of the draft, or you could justify going at the bottom of the second round, all based on circumstance. So that's a unique situation compared to other classes. Maybe Mozzie Smith is there at 54. Maybe he's gone at 33 with or 34 with the Cardinals. Like, it's entirely possible. It's kind of just based on how teams feel about him. And if the Chargers pick him up, I think they will be getting a defensive interior player who will be there for 5 or 6 years, anchoring the middle.
Yeah, I've taken him in the second round in a lot of my mock drafts. I love him as kind of that nose tackle with a little bit of flexibility. So, yeah. But then you've got a little something, keeping the LT family tree alive. Was that part of your thought processes there?
It was once the pick was made, I kind of connected the dots on it. Like, oh yeah, LaDainian Tomlinson, I don't know the exact connection. I think it's nephew. Yeah. His nephew going to the Chargers would be great. And of course, when I was once upon a time a Charger fan in San Diego, it was great to have Tomlinson there. He was the first player I kind of grew up watching the last couple years of him with the Chargers before he went to the Jets and broke our heart in the playoffs in 2010. But Travius Hodges-Tomlinson is a second, third round kind of player, and he was great. He had great production. If you're someone who likes production in college as your guy for getting picked, I know Walter Mitchell likes guys who put up numbers in college. So Travius Hodges-Tomlinson meets that criteria, and he's a classic third round guy. I know you had Garrett Williams as the third round guy for the Chargers, and Hodges-Tomlinson kind of fits the same bill as a prospect.
Here's my one concern with that pick for the Chargers. You have guaranteed you have a short outside cornerback between him and Asante Samuel Jr., and they're both good players. But you can't hide both of them in the slot now. So you're gonna have to have like a Jason Brett kind of guy on the outside. Now those are two guys that, if you're gonna do that, they have the skill, but that still does create matchup issues potentially.
Absolutely. And JC Jackson being as bad as he was changes the math for the Chargers quite a bit. I don't know how he fits into their long-term plans. Maybe he's going to play more of a interior corner type, but I'm not exactly sure how he's going to go about it.
Looks like your San Diego State's having a little bit of they're trying to narrow the gap, huh?
They just went on a 9-0 run apparently, so they got back into the game after being down like 15. We'll see what happens. Maybe you'll get my unbridled tears at the end of this podcast. Right. Maybe that's how we'll finish this off.
I just imagine like I'm gonna be mentioning a very mundane 6th round pick, and you're gonna be like, yeah. I'm like, well, I liked him too, but not that much. Yeah. So let's walk us through the rest of your picks real quick.
So Nick Hampton, I mentioned earlier, we'll get to this as a little bit goes on. So edge rusher for the Chargers is more of a depth piece than anything else. Like, people think edge for the Chargers, they're like, oh, they have Joey Bosa. And then you go through the rest of the team and it's not a whole lot of guys. They play a scheme where they don't have a lot of linebacker edge rushing, but obviously they're Joey Bosa, and that's kind of about it. I mean, they tried it with Khalil Mack. It didn't work. They have Sebastian Joseph Day as kind of more of an interior guy. They just kind of need some players on that defensive line. We've already given them Mozzie Smith, of course, and Nick Hampton is a player where this is kind of where you expect him to get picked. He's a 4th round guy, smaller school at Appalachian State, although Appalachian State's been ranked in the top 25 a couple times the last 4 years. I think that it's just kind of a depth pick for them. And then Michael Wilson, the receiver from Stanford, is kind of the same logic that you went by when you did your mock draft, which is a depth receiver. We're not going to slander Joshua Palmer here,
Mhm.
but we are going to bring up the fact that Michael Wilson fits the kind of bill that the Chargers are looking for in terms of a wide receiver. I want to pull up his measurables just so that I have them correct for sure here. He's 6'2", 215 pounds. He's got a 31-inch arm length, and he is going to be a immediate wide receiver 4 for the Chargers. Give it some time, he might end up blossoming into a legitimate number 2 or number 3 for what the Chargers want to do. And if they get him at 5th round value, that helps when you're $7 million over the cap. We talked about Antonio Mafi earlier. Same player the Cardinals picked. Chargers could use him too. 6th round guy. Really like him. Incredibly athletic. And then Earl Bostic as the last pick for the Chargers is another offensive line depth piece. Anytime I can pick the lovable loser Kansas Jayhawks, I will absolutely take that. I think he could be a great pickup for the Cardinals too.
Yeah.
Bostic coming in there is a player that obviously 7th round guy. He might go undrafted, so you could even pick him up after and sign him to a contract if you're Arizona. I think that he works as a left tackle or a right tackle, depending on what you need. And he is a practice squad candidate with the possibility of filling in for some injury reasons. I think that he works for both the Cardinals and the Chargers. I like him as a prospect, as a Kansas guy who's versatile in terms of the tackle position. I think he could work.
Yeah, I really like that Mafi pick. I reached for, good offensive line guard early, but if you're not going guard early like I did, waiting on Mafi is a really nice concession there, a guy who could become a starter for you. So, all right, awesome. Well, again, you know much more about the Chargers than I do, so you know what you're talking about here, I think, and the Chargers maybe don't know what they're doing, but you do. So.
Yes.
All
Even
right,
though I
awesome.
am now a 6-year recovering Charger fan, I don't watch the games. I don't emotionally invest. I can't do it anymore. We gotta be healthy with our lives, and it's much better to watch the Chargers blow 27-point leads and laugh instead of feeling sad inside.
That is fair. That is fair. All right. Well, I'm going to do my Cardinals mock, and then we'll let you get out of here so you can watch what's left of the game, unless it's done by the time we're done.
We got 6 minutes left, it
All right.
looks like, so we'll be all right.
Okay. Well, I did a Cardinals mock draft, and someone asked earlier if there was going to be a Titans trade back, because that's one of the scenarios people have been talking about lately, is that the Titans might want to move up to get a quarterback. So I had the Cardinals trade back to 11, pick up a 2nd and a 6th round, I believe, plus a future 1st and 3rd round. You're trading up that far from 11 to 3. There's a lot of draft capital involved. Someone asked earlier if I thought Devin Witherspoon would still be there at 11. Obviously, that's who I took. I'm not convinced he'll be there at 11. I think he might go a little before that, but he was there, so I took him. I do think there's a good chance one of the 2 cornerbacks, him or Gonzalez, is still there at 11. But we'll see. But I like them both. So I took Witherspoon at 11. Then I got Will McDonald, a really, an edge rusher who's got a lot of nice tools. I took him in the 2nd round. So, not going edge in the 1st round. I went ahead and got an edge rusher in the 2nd round. And then I got Luke Whippler, center, who I think, the Cardinals have been linked with him. I think he's the guy they're more likely to take. I got him late in the 2nd round. And then I've got Jeremy Robinson. He's listed as a safety, but I mentioned this last week. He's the guy who plays safety and slot corner. I think they're going to play him more in the slot, but they have been linked with him. Carl Brooks, an edge out of Bowling Green, but he's a little bit bigger edge. So I think I love those hybrid 300-pound edge players for this defense that they're going to have. So nice guy to develop there. Then there's a Hopkins trade. I traded him for a 3rd and a future 5th. We'll see what happens with that. And then I got Kobe Turner, a defensive interior lineman that I really like, in the 3rd round. Then I got us a running back, Tank Bigsby, out of Auburn. Then I went with one of my favorite offensive linemen, Chandler Zavala. He's on pretty much all my drafts. Ronnie Bell, depth at receiver. An actual safety, Quindell Johnson, to be a depth piece. And for the first time, I've taken a quarterback in my mocks. Now, I've talked about this in the past that I didn't think they would take one, but I thought they were going to bring in a veteran like a Jacoby Brissett or Teddy Bridgewater, and they have not done that. They re-signed David Blau, and then they brought in, and they've got Colt. So because they didn't go out and get a bridge quarterback, I think there's a chance they might draft someone on day 3. So that's what I went with here. Robert Moore is asking Joe, 2 safeties, Joe, did I miss some Cardinals news where safety becomes a major need? So no, what you missed is where I said that Jamie Robinson for me is going to be a slot corner. They have been linked to him. I think they're going to play him at slot corner. So I'm taking him with the understanding that that's what he's going to be playing. Let's see. Let me get some of the comments in here. Agent 47 A+ already. So he likes that. More saying, give me Jeffrey Simmons. I think they're talking maybe for a trade there. I'll bring Melvin back with Jeffrey Simmons.
I think the Jeffrey Simmons is the move from 3 to 11.
In the
Jeffrey
trade.
Simmons.
There we go. Yeah. I don't think Tennessee's doing that, but we would take that. CB says replace Witherspoon for Lucas Van Ness. I consider a solid job. I like Van Ness a lot, so I wouldn't hate him there. If you're doing Van Ness there, then you're doing a cornerback at 34 instead, and I wouldn't mind that at all. Tio Capero, thank you for being here. I really like Carl Brooks in the 3rd round. I like him too. I think a really interesting profile, right? So anyway, that's what I went with. Do you have any thoughts that on this mock draft here, Mr. Kyle Ledbetter?
I really like the Whippler pick in the 2nd round. I know you love John Michael Schmitz. I know in reality, maybe McDonald falls to 41 in this scenario, and maybe they could get John Michael Schmitz at 34 and McDonald. But if you don't get John Michael Schmitz, Whippler is a great guy. Obviously, I went with Stromberg from Arkansas as the center the Cardinals pick up. But I love all 3 of those guys. I think there's a equal chance all of them will be NFL starting caliber centers. And I like that all 3 of our mocks had different situations there, whether it's going with Stromberg, going with Whippler, or of course, John Michael Schmitz, as has been well documented by you.
A favorite of the TCR land. Yeah. We've been going more Luke Whippler lately because someone had mentioned that the Cardinals are really looking at him closely, and that someone said that they think they're likely to draft him. So if I had to bet, I think they're more likely to take Whippler than John Michael Schmitz. Jordan's saying that Tennessee has been rumored to be open to moving on from Jeffrey Simmons, so that's interesting. Okay. David saying, if you're trading Hopkins, I like to get a wide receiver early in the draft. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get A.T. Perry. I just don't think they're going to go receiver. We talked about that earlier. I know you don't think so either, Kyle. Even moving on from him.
Yeah. I said if I were in the decision-making chair, I would not do it. I don't know what the Cardinals will do themselves, but I am a give Rondale Moore a chance kind of guy.
Yeah, I think if they do take a receiver, they kind of need a guy who plays more outside because Rondale Moore is a slot. But yeah, Jordan P. saying it was Tony Pauling. That's right. From Pro Football Network said he heard we will draft Whippler, which is bold to say. And Pauling was, I knew that Pauling was the guy who said the Cardinals were going to take Zaven Collins last year before the draft, and he did. So yeah, so there you go. Real quick, there was a question earlier and I wanted to save it. Tony Height has, apologies if you already, addressed this on the previous mock draft lives, but what's the panic level 1 through 10 if Cardinals emerge from draft without picking up a center? So we've talked about the center, so the situation for the Cardinals right now is they have Hjalti Frodholt, right? Who was drafted by the Patriots, I believe, but was with the Browns. He was the backup center, and they've signed him, and I think with the idea that he can be a starting center if they need him to, but not a high level one. And I think they're going to draft someone, and Frodholt is the backup plan. So, I mean, when you look at the Cardinals, what do you think if they don't draft a center? Do you think that what would you think the panic level should be for them?
I just don't know what the plan would be if they don't walk away with any center, because
Mm-hmm.
if Froholt is the only player on the roster who could play center, then that's not really a great strategy going into camp. And look, a lot can change by the time week 1 starts. I mean, players get
Yeah.
cut by teams, signed to practice squads, even undrafted guys get invited to camp. Obviously, a lot could change. So I'm never going to hit panic meter at 10 coming out of a draft, especially with a rebuilding team like the
Yeah.
Cardinals. I know it's not really a rebuild, but with a new general manager, new coach, all that stuff, call it a 5. I
Yeah.
I would be confused at the very least if they don't pick up a guard who could move over to center in a pinch. That would be
Yeah.
strange. I'm going to shout out our buddy Walter Mitchell. He loves Chandler Savala, so the fact that you
Mm-hmm.
added him in, maybe he could slide over to center in a break glass in case of emergency. I know it's not ideal, but uh, if they walked away with nobody who could also play center, I would be a bit confused.
Yeah, they drafted Lasita Smith last year, and he's a guy who could play a little bit of center. I think if needed,
Yeah.
they've had him practice there. Agent 47 says his panic level would be 8. I think mine is panic is probably a strong word for how I would feel. My panic level might be a 4 or a 5. Froholt can play center. He's not a great starting center, I don't think. At least he's been his PFF grades were okay, like I think in the 60s ish. I mean, he's a guy who can be serviceable. He's played there, but I would be disappointed. My disappointment level would be like a 10 because I want them to come out with Whippler or Olusegun Olatimi or John Michael Schmitz or someone like that. So I'd be very disappointed, but I'm not going to say panic because they would probably bring in someone else, a free agent or an undrafted rookie, or someone also at least to compete there. So panic, maybe not. Disappointment level high though. So
I think we're both, and perhaps also the chat is saying that like Schmitz, Whippler, these are long-term options at
yeah,
center. If they come out of the draft and don't come out with a center, it means the long-term center position has not been filled.
yes, 100%. Yeah, that I completely agree with that. Right. So I think they're taking a center. I think that's something that will be a priority for them. I know they downplayed that when asked, but it's smokescreen season, so you're not gonna worry about. You're not gonna buy into that. So, all right. So we've gotten through our mock drafts. So, Kyle, this has been a lot of fun, man. I know we've done some podcast stuff together, but it's neat to kind of be on a live stream with you, have you on my show. I've got your links in the description of the video, but why don't you tell people what your content is, what they can expect from it, why they should check out the Take It Easy podcast, and all the other great things you do.
Absolutely. And same to you, Joe. It's just so much fun to do this type of live stream mock draft stuff. It's so much fun to go through the whole process. And obviously, doing this with your community has been fun. And I've enjoyed myself, even as San Diego is not going to win their first championship tonight. They are down 12 points with about 2 minutes to go. So we don't get my tears at the end of this. We don't get my celebratory tears for breaking the curse. But I will say the Take It Easy podcast is a daily show that I did going back to college. I now work in the radio field a little bit. So if you want to check out Sacktown Sports, you can find me occasionally there. But Take It Easy podcast is a daily show. We'll go around the world of sports. I'd call it more of like a national sports show in a way. So you could check out Take It Easy 5 days a week, maybe 6 days a week. And I also do the Red Rain podcast, of course, with Walter Mitchell. You can check that out as well. I wrote a book about the San Antonio Spurs and Kawhi Leonard, a San Diego State graduate, Kawhi Leonard, who I used to go watch play as a child, and the story with them and the Spurs and how they got to everything in the last 10 years or so. So that book's available now. If you go to my Twitter, there are links to all of that stuff. It would be much appreciated if you support, even if you aren't the biggest basketball fan. I am definitely proud of that work, and I think you guys will enjoy the story as well. Little stuff here and there. Obviously, we're here on the Cardinal Rule. Various YouTubes, Instagrams, Twitters, all that stuff is in the link of that Joe has posted and available on my Twitter, which Grandizer in the chat has also helpfully put out. If you want to follow me on Twitter as well, that's the best place to find a lot of my work. And we're just starting out in the sports radio field. I'm 21 and working my way towards some sort of career in this weird sports radio space or sports talk space or even sports writing space. So if you're interested in supporting our dreams, all that stuff is available with links that Joe has helpfully posted and links that I have tried to make readily available on my Twitter page.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, I appreciate you. I always enjoy our conversations when we're on your podcast with you, me, and Walter Mitchell, and enjoy having you here. I know the folks have appreciated you. Agent 47, good show, by the way, Kyle. So appreciate you being here, hanging out with us. So I'm going to let you go so you can, do what you do, which is, get used to losing with your teams, right? Or deal with the losing, right?
Yeah.
Which
usually we lose before we ever get to the end. This is a new experience of making it to the championship and losing. It's a nice little change. And like I said, I'm not a big college basketball person. If it hadn't been San Diego State, I wouldn't have cared at all about the championship tonight. So yeah, we're not going to win the championship, but hopefully the Cardinals will be my team to break the drought. That would be a nice sight to see, as if Arizona were the team that won a championship, and I could celebrate with you and Walter and all the wonderful Cardinals fans that I've gotten to interact with over the years.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you, Kyle. I'm going to let you get out of here. Then I'm going to do the mock drafts that have been submitted for the show by the viewers. But thank you for all the conversation, everything. Have a great rest of your night, and I know we'll be talking sometime soon.
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you so much for inviting me on the Mock Draft Monday. I've been very excited to do one of these. After following your page for a year or so, I've been very excited to partake in a Mock Draft Monday. So it was very much a pleasure and a joy on my end.
Well, you nailed it. So good job. All right.
Also, Agent 47. I am not the biggest Rams fan either. I will say that as well on the way out the door. So
nice.
Thank you for all of your support and all of your love. I will talk to you guys again soon.
All right. Talk to you later. Peace. All right. Well, guess what, folks? It is time for the mock drafts. Let me say hey to some dropped in. My buddy Kevin from the Reset Musical. I was in Texas. And we hung out. In fact, Kevin dropped me off at the airport this morning. So it was good hanging out with you. Enjoyed discussing wide zone running scheme, among other things. We certainly ran the gamut. I think we solved all the world's problems. So thank you, Kevin, for popping in here. Appreciate you, my friend. So it's time for the mock drafts. And we've got a new quick video sting. When we're talking about mock drafts, we are talking about resetting the Cardinals. So the Reset Musical, if you were here last week, I shared this sting. Kevin and his friend, they're doing a kind of their own musical. They're writing it from scratch on the Reset Musical YouTube. They've got a few videos that or links to some couple of the songs, kind of they're in draft mode. They're working on that stuff. But anyway, he took one of the songs, a little clip from it, and changed some of the lyrics to kind of fit Arizona Cardinals. So we're talking about a roster reset. So to set up time for the mock drafts that everyone submitted, let's talk about how it's time to do the reset.
It's time to hit the reset. It's time to clean up all the sitcoms.
All right. So it is time to hit the reset. So we're going to get to your guys' mock drafts. Woohoo! Game time. Moore's Legacy asking, big question. When we win the Super Bowl in 3 years, we're going to celebrate big or not? We're going to celebrate like nobody's business, right? Tony Height, would you agree that the best move, though, would be to seek a long-term answer at center for college? 100%. I mean, I know. I think Kyle Kyle would have agreed. They need to get a center, right? I think what we said is if they don't draft a center, then it's clear that they're going with a 1 year fill-in, but we think they should draft one 100%. All right. So here we go. Tony, well, that just became my new ringtone. There you go. Awesome. So let's look at the first mock. Now, I'm going to tell you, we didn't have as many mock drafts submitted this week. We've got maybe 9 or 10 of them. Part of that might have been because I was out a week all the time. Maybe I wasn't pushing that out there, but we're going to go through the ones we got. So the first mock draft submitted by our buddy Red C. Corey, I know, I don't know. I didn't see him in the chat. He said he was off work today, so he might be hanging out, lurking around here. But here's the first mock draft. Now he's got to trade DeAndre Hopkins. He traded for a 2nd and a 4th round pick. I have a feeling it's not going to yield that much, but he's got another pick with the Colts trading up, right? Moore's Legacy PFF is a big scam. Listen, I know they added that paywall for their mock draft. So I know a lot of people are really frustrated, understandably so. So Red Sea, though, he moved back to number 4, took Will Anderson. Obviously, we love that. Then he got the cornerback in Emmanuel Forbes, offensive tackle Matthew Bergeron. Now, this is a guy that the Cardinals have met with, and I think he's a guy that I wouldn't be shocked if they took him. Maybe in the 2nd round, if he lasts that long. He's an intriguing tackle prospect. And then he went with Luke Whippler, right? We've got the Luke Whippler at center. Zach Harrison, kind of a bigger edge guy who can maybe move in a little inside a little bit. So nice, versatile defensive lineman there. Then running back Kendry Miller out of TCU at 96. Then we've got Zach Pickens, defensive line out of South Carolina, who I know showed up on Kyle's mock draft. So we got a little interior defensive line help. Then Corey went with Andrew Voorhees. He's going to have a redshirt season because of the injury. And then he went with a nice big receiver out of Iowa State, Xavier Hutchinson, who's kind of a big physical receiver. Then a punter, and then went with another cornerback, Mekhi Garner, out of LSU. So a little more depth there. And then linebacker, Mohamed Diabate. I'm sure I butchered that. All right. So he's got some nice picks here. Someone's asking what website. This is NFL Mock Draft Database, I believe. All right. So yeah, I think, Corey, listen, I think the only thing that's missing from here is your favorite Tyree Wilson, right? I totally expected you would be taking Tyree Wilson because you love him so much. No, but this is a good mock, right? Will Anderson, you love that. Again, the cornerback, like Bergeron, Whippler. Yeah, solid. And I know that when Corey did this, he used that chart I have of the Monty Ossenfort draft kind of heat map based on what the Patriots did, kind of looking as a projection of maybe how Monty might approach the draft. So he kind of used that as a guide for this as well. So good job. I like it, Corey. That is a good mock. Next up, David Jimenez, who was, I know, in the chat earlier. He's got a trade back scenario with the Lions. Joe throwing jabs. Listen, that's what I do, right? That's part of my job here. Got to keep them humble. I wonder if Andrew Voorhees is rather than Jason Voorhees. Maybe, right? So we've got a trade with the Lions, right? Trade back scenario with them. They're moving up to get a quarterback likely in this, right? And then another trade back a little bit later to with Seattle to get from 34 to 37 to add some picks. Got Will Anderson at 6, man. If he lasted that long, that would be awesome. Keely Ringo at 37. So you got a cornerback guy who maybe is, guy who's got some tools, but needs some coaching up. Some people think he might go later than that. Some people think he might not. So, if you're getting a guy you're going to develop, that's interesting there. I think some people are a little bit down on him because he struggled in terms of, covering guys, but he has the physical tools, no doubt. And then, of course, we have...
It's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
I mean, it's always an A plus when you got John Michael Schmitz there, right? Getting him at number 48, so we love that. Javon Dexter, big interior defensive lineman who, I was looking at some of his scouting reports today. He's kind of an interior lineman. He's big and he's strong. He's not super quick off the line. He's more a guy who's physical and strong, but guy you could play on the inside. So we got him there. And then we've got safety Chris Smith II out of Georgia. So you got some depth at safety there. I wonder like if going that's not super early, but for safety, if that's a guy who's depth, that might be a little early for that. I don't know, but I don't know. I wonder if that's the guy who can play any slot corner as well. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at him a little closer. Marvin Mims, receiver out of Oklahoma. I think he's like 5'11". He's pretty speedy. So getting a receiver there. Running back Chase Brown out of Illinois. I love that pick 151. That's a really nice pick right there. Then we love Kobe Turner there and at pick 168. Absolutely love him. Got another quarterback. So you've doubled up. Got a couple cornerbacks. Mekhi Blackman out of USC. Love Carter Ward. That's one of my favorite day 3 tackles. So that's a guy who, he's had an injury last year. That's the one issue with him. Missed a good part of the season. I think he got injured early in the season, missed the rest of the season with an injury, but the skill's there. So that's a really nice player there. Could be a starting right tackle for the team pretty quickly. And then got defensive line Tyler Lacey out of Oklahoma State. So a little more defensive line depth. David Jimenez is saying Chris Smith reminds me of Baker and can hit like a truck. Okay. Again, it's just, I wonder where he's going to play with Jalen and Buddha, but you need depth. So I don't hate it. I go safety a little later if it's me. That's a pick at the point where you're still hoping to maybe find a starter, early day 3, but maybe I'm just quibbling too much here. But overall, no, I think this is a nice draft. You hit what we're looking for in terms of the positions you need to hit. Got a couple players on here that we haven't had on a lot of mocks, so it's nice to see some new names on here like Marvin Mims and players like that. So no, I like it overall. And Robert Moore says, my son says A+ grade for anyone that drafts John Michael Schmitz. You have it there. So David, nice mock. Thank you very much. I like it. Next up we have Gazornik Brian. I don't know if he's in the chat, but I don't think I saw him there, but appreciate him submitting a mock draft. So he's got a couple trade backs here, right? Trade back, Seattle trading up to 5, and then the Raiders trading up with us to 7. Or we're trading up to 5, trading us number 7. So you got a couple trade backs, and then you got Devon Witherspoon, right? Witherspoon, we love him. And then also getting Kalijah Cansey, really disruptive interior defensive lineman. Love that. Going with Osiris Torrance, good player. I've talked about this before. For me, he's not. There's other guards I like just much better as a fit for this offense. But I mean, he's a good player, so he can work in it. I just think there's guys that work a little better. But nonetheless, you've got Steve Avila, who is a guy who has played center. In fact, he played. This most recent year, he played guard, but he played center the 2 seasons before that. So I'm guessing, Brian, that you maybe are going with Avila actually as a center here. And he's got that versatility, right? And then we got Jamie Robinson, talked about him a bit. He's safety, but I think he can play slot corner for them. Kendra Miller, you've got the halfback out of TCU, so you get a running back in round 3. Then another cornerback, Garrett Williams, so doubled up, got a couple cornerbacks. So you've got some nice depth there. Then you got Charlie Jones, receiver out of Purdue. I need to look. I know we've talked about it a little bit. I need to look at him a little bit closer, but adding a receiver there, early day 3. Got a trade back to get get an extra pick there in the 6th round. We've got another we got a defensive interior lineman, Jared Clark out of Coastal Carolina, get a little more depth there. Then a developmental edge rusher, Valami Fahoko, out of San Jose State. Then you've got Aidan O'Connell, so you got a quarterback in the 6th round out of Purdue to keep him with his connection with Charlie Jones, right? And I believe there's 1 year of overlap between O'Connell and Rondale Moore, if I'm not mistaken. So got a backup quarterback here who's got some familiarity thrown at some of the targets. And then a cornerback, Carrington Valentine out of Kentucky. So you got 3 cornerbacks plus Jamie Robinson. So I just don't know there'd be enough room for all those cornerbacks. So Valentine might be more of a practice squad player. But, at that point, then, that's fine, right? A 6th-round pick often ends up there, right? So got a couple of people saying, yeah, I assume Steve Avila is going to move to center in that scenario. Grandizer likes this, right? Fills a lot of needs. He thinks this is a solid draft. Robert also thinks Avila's be a center in this, right? Agent 47, I would more go Avila on 34 and get a center in 3rd round, but good draft overall. Okay. Okay. People like this draft. I do too. Maybe there's a few questions I have about it, but overall, pretty solid draft there. So thank you so much for submitting that. Next up, we have a friendly Viking, who's got a trade back with the Colts to add a pick and still get Will Anderson, right? So we like that. Steve Avila, you got him, but you're keeping him at guard because you have followed that up with Luke Whippler. So you've got the center and the guard. You've got a Hopkins trade for a 2nd-round pick. Starting to seem like he's probably not going to get a 2nd-round pick if he we talked about that earlier. Like I had thought he would and others had thought he would, but nonetheless, that's what we got as a trade here. Then we got Eli Ricks, cornerback out of Alabama. So you got a cornerback a little bit later, but this is a nice deep cornerback class. So I don't mind going a little bit later on cornerback, for some depth there. Love A.T. Perry, number 71, obviously. We've got a trade back to add some picks. Carl Brooks, love that big kind of versatile edge / defensive lineman. Then you've got Moro Jomo, who's more of a, I think built more like a traditional 3 technique, kind of like what Zach Allen was in terms of the position. So you got some really nice help from that defensive line there. Chandler Zavala, we obviously love him. You've really, that interior offensive line, you've really shored that up here. Dwayne McBride, we got a halfback out of University of Alabama, Birmingham. Got someone added to the running back room there. Then you've got some depth at tight end with Zach Kuntz. I've said this before, but I think a tight end on day 3 is a sneaky play that we might see. I know we've got, a couple tight ends here, Trey McBride and Zach Ertz, but I could see them looking to get some depth there on day 3. Then we've got Mekhi Blackman. So we've seen him on a couple drafts here. So you've got another cornerback. So you've got a couple of them there. Then you got another halfback. So you doubled up there, Eric Gray. And then wide receiver, Ronnie Bell, player we like. So you got a couple receivers. So, man, a lot of nice picks here. Maybe you doubled up on a couple positions where I'm usually just going one player like receiver or running back. But you traded back to get extra picks, so you have it to work with. Man, that interior offensive line, Avila, Whippler, and Zavala, man, that could be a nice interior offensive line for years to come. So I definitely like that, right? For sure. Let's see, got a couple of folks who just dropped in, we got Doc's Cards. Thanks for being here. Inside linebacker early and often. That's right? That's that's the Steve Keim special. Robert Moore's given his grades. He's a harsh grader. I'm a professor, and Robert's a harder grader than I am. 6 great value picks. The other's questionable. 1 too many cornerbacks. Grade B-. Okay. Let's see. The only questionable move based on realistic is the trade with the Niners. Okay, so yeah, in division trades aren't as often, right? So that's maybe the one thing here. But okay. But overall, good mock draft. I like it. Next up, we have Judai. He was in the chat earlier. I don't know if he's still here now, but he's got his mock draft here. We've got a trade back with the Titans. So remember, that was talked about, there were some people talking about that in social media and reporting that's, maybe something that they might suggest, or a team that they've suggested might be looking to move up. So he did that, and then he went with Peter Skronsky. I know that's Aaron Van Buren approved right there. I love Skronsky as a prospect. The question with him, is he going to be a tackle or a guard? What I've heard is he could be a good tackle, but all-pro guard. So I think he's going to probably end up at guard. We'll see. I love him as a player. I just don't think they're going to go that early with someone who's going to be a guard. But I get it though. I mean, he's going to be a great player at that position. So I totally get that. Then we love Luke Whippler there, right? So you've really kind of shored up that interior offensive line right there with those two. Darius Rush got a cornerback out of South Carolina. I was looking at his profile earlier. He was a receiver who was converted to cornerback, has played cornerback last couple years, more of an outside cornerback guy. They said he doesn't have quite the quickness to play in the slot, I think, but a nice cornerback in a very deep cornerback class. Then we got tackle Blake Freeland, who's kind of a work in progress. He needs some development in terms of his technique. He's very raw, but very athletic. I mean, just totally killed it at the combine. Just some of his numbers were crazy. So, in terms of getting that athletic, tackle for the wide zone, he's a guy who could become that. If you're drafting him, he's not starting, this year. He needs some coaching up, and he's a guy who's maybe starting next year. Brett Coleman had him as a pick for the Cardinals, I believe, in the 3rd round in his mock draft. So that's an interesting prospect. Moro Jomo getting some help on the interior defensive line. Kobe Turner, love him there, right? And then Carl Brooks. So, you didn't, and then, Yasir Abdullah. So, I've got a Hopkins trade in there for a couple of 4th round picks. So you didn't go edge early, but or defensive line early. You went with offensive line and cornerback, but then you really kind of, hit it hard from the 3rd and 4th rounds, going Ojomo, Turner, Brooks, and Abdullah. So I don't hate that. Maybe me, I'm trying to get at least one defensive lineman or edge rusher earlier than that. But you've got like 4 players I like there. So I'm not going to complain about that too much there. Then you've got Chandler Zavala. Obviously, we love him. So, man, with Zavala, Skronsky, Whippler, that interior offensive line is set. You've really definitely addressed the offensive line when you add Freeland there too as well. You got a Keaton Mitchell, running back of East Carolina in round 6, and receiver Jake Bobo out of UCLA, round 6 also. So got a couple skill players later. So, yeah, I think you took a novel approach. It's different than a lot of what we've seen, and it's nice to see it mixed up. Definitely address the lines. I think here's what I would say. Like, I like this mock draft in terms of what I think is likely to happen with Monty Austin-Fort. Again, this is all based on kind of the analysis I did in that video where I looked at the Patriots draft history when he was in the front office. Maybe he'll go deviate from that. So I'm not saying this is definitely going to happen, but the pattern, what seems to be that he's more likely to go offensive line late and defense earlier. They go tackles. They had a history of going tackles early sometimes, but those interior offensive linemen were all kind of like, 3rd round or later, typically, in terms of the history there. So, I like this mock draft. I just don't know that they're going Skronsky and Whippler and Freeland that early in real life. But I think this would be a nice outcome, and especially with some of those players you got there. Let's see. There's some comments on here. Let's see. Robert Moore saying could have got more value with the Titans trade, in my opinion. Assume Skronsky at guard. Decent draft overall, B-. Okay. Jordan P saying Jake Bobo is interesting. I was watching Dorian Thompson. Yeah, the quarterback there, tape almost every single highlight he had pass wise to Bobo. Yeah, I saw someone mentioned that once before too. That just he really liked throwing it to him. Kind of a bigger receiver. So that's an interesting look. Or interesting guy to look at there. Agent 47. I don't like the idea of 2 offensive tackles early in draft plus the trade of D-Hop. Though I believe when he submitted this mock, he also mentioned that he really had Skronsky, as an elite guard. So, Judai's approach for this, and in his notes, he said as much. To him, he's going elite guard with Skronsky. So, but yeah, okay. David Jimenez saying, love Skronsky, but not 11, and Rush is underrated. Can be a great great quarterback a couple of years when Cards make a run for the bowl. Right here was hoping. Cole McFarland, thanks for being here. Hey Joe, I'm late, so maybe I missed it, but what do you think Hopkins release rumors that would infuriate me so much to lose someone like him for nothing? Yeah, we talked about that a bit. I'll give you the short version. I think it's a smokescreen to try to bring the price down, but if you get a chance, go back and watch it because we talked about that a good bit actually. So yeah. Robert Moore, I agree. Defensive picks will go first. Okay, yeah. We can go offensive tackle next year. Yeah. Cards. Let's see. AZ Cards Nerd 11 said, Jordan P. We're not drafting another quarterback out of UCLA after what happened in 2018. Never again. Yeah, that we got a little bit of scarred by that one, right? But DTR is a quarterback I actually do like if on day 3. But this, history of UCLA quarterbacks notwithstanding. But no, Jude, I like the players here. Maybe in terms of, I don't think Monty would take this approach, but I like a lot of players on here. So thank you very much for that. Brian Ostrander / Brian Darko, I believe I don't know if he's in the chat earlier or not. I thought I saw him. But here's he's got to trade back with the Titans. So the Titans is a popular trade back scenario because it's something that's been discussed on social media and reporting. So he's got a trade back, got round 1, then a second round pick and a third round pick. I think, and I think other folks will probably say something similar. I think there's probably going to be, if that trade happens, there's going to be a future first round pick in it. But what's up, Salty? Salty just dropped in. What's up, everyone? I don't want to trade back. Yeah, I know. Like, listen, that's the debate, right? Trading back. I'm a trade back person, or I don't want to trade back that far. Okay. Yeah, I tell you, I don't mind trading back that far. And I know what most people want is trade back one spot and get Will Anderson. That'd be, again, chef's kiss, right? That's a great move. If you're trading back this far, you're actually going to end up getting probably first round pick this year, a day 2 pick this year, whether it be second or third, and probably a future first and future second. So you're getting a lot of picks if you move back that far. But I get it. I mean, listen, you're also giving up on some of the really good players. I think at 11 there's some cornerbacks I think there'd be a really good cornerback there, but that's probably as far back though as I'd probably want to go. But he trades back to 11, gets Miles Murphy. So you got an edge out of a Clemson guy, so kind of that next tier of edge rushers. Then second round, Mazi Smith, interior defensive lineman out of Michigan. We talked about him earlier. And then, of course,
it's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
We love John Michael Schmitz. I don't know if he's going to last to 41, but boy, I love getting him there. DJ Turner, cornerback out of Michigan, who ran the fastest time of any cornerback at the combine. So he's a guy who might be moving up some boards. So you got a cornerback there. Zach Harrison, you got another edge rusher, kind of a bigger edge rusher, versatile. Cedric Tillman, a receiver, that big physical receiver. So that's an intriguing player. Cornerback Darius Rush, we've talked about him a few times. So you got a couple cornerbacks in there to develop. Andrew Voorhees is going to be a red shirt for injury, or kind of have a red shirt season for his injury. So that's a play for the future. Then Chandler Zavala, we love that. Then safety Rashard Torrance. So, I mean, I love Mazi Smith there and getting him with a couple edge rushers. For me, if I'm turning back to 11, there's probably a different edge rusher. I'm interested in Nolan Smith or Lucas Van Ness, but it's just maybe a matter of preference there. Love John Michael Schmitz. I'm intrigued by the cornerbacks you've picked up. They're guys that are not necessarily, I think, ready to be starters right away or number 1 and 2 cornerbacks right away, but they're guys both who are kind of some upside plays, like Harrison. So yeah, I'm not taking Voorhees, not because of injury, because I don't think he's a great fit for the wide zone. That's my opinion, but love Zavala. Maybe would like to see a running back in there if it's me, but overall, overall some nice players here. Let's see. We've got a couple comments. Yeah, 11 is really a good stop. There will have Nolan Smith, Joey Porter Jr., Miles Murphy. I mean, there's some nice players there. Robert Moore saying, I'm okay with drafting Voorhees late. Overall, draft is pretty good, grade A minus. Okay, so Robert Moore likes this. Okay, so thank you for your mock, Brian. Next up, we have Awesome Robert 20, who's got a mock draft here with Will Anderson Jr., a third-round pick, number 3 overall pick. Then he went with Jahmyr Gibbs, running back Alabama, 34. I've seen him mocked around there before. I think he's going to be a good player, but I'm probably not going running back that early. If I am, it's probably not him. I'm going later, but I mean, I know some people have Gibbs mocked that early. Then we got Luke Whippler. Love that. Hodges Tomlinson, cornerback at 96. Nice pick there. Mingo, a lot of people really like him, I know. So that's a good pick there. Colby Wooden, defensive tackle out of Auburn, so again, some interior defensive line help. Then you've got Connor Galvin, offensive tackle out of Baylor, kind of a big offensive developmental guy, and then safety Javon Hicks out of Cincinnati. Obviously you love Will Anderson. I'm not going Gibbs there, but I know some people would, so that's not crazy out of the realm of possibility. Love Whippler pick. Hodges Tomlinson's nice. Mingo. There are other tackles I like better than Connor Galvin there. But I don't mind going tackle late there. Don't know much about Javon Hicks safety, but depth safety, I don't mind that. So yeah. Let's see. Jordan P saying, I'm surprised people don't draft Cameron Mitchell to us. Good cornerback from Northwestern, and our current quarterback coach with his coach at Northwestern. He'll be really good slot cornerback, can be had late. Yeah, I think you mentioned that earlier. So that'd be an interesting guy to look at as a day 3 guy, right? Agent 47, that's spicy, but I like Gibbs. Okay, so he likes Gibbs. So there we go. Yeah, this is not a bad mock. Maybe there's a few things I do differently, but I think there's some nice players here. So yeah, good job. Thank you. Next up, we have Chris Young. I know it's a little hard to see here, trying to fit everything on there. He's got some trades, a couple trade backs to get some picks. Got Will Anderson at number 4, Emmanuel Forbes at 34, and so early second round, then Steve Avila, and then Luke Whippler. So you got guard and center back to back. Javon Dexter, you got interior defensive line help there. Cedric Tillman, that's a nice player. Wanya Morris, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. That's an interesting guy. I've heard some people talk about him, and he that would be a really interesting pick. I kind of like that. Jay Ward, safety out of LSU. Jalen Redmond, defensive line out of Oklahoma. Then Hunter Lipke, fullback out of North Dakota State. And then Rezjon Wright, cornerback out of Oregon State, I think. So, those first 4 or 5 picks are pretty common players that we see taken, and there's a reason for that, right? Those are players that I think a lot of people like. So I like that. I think Tillman, there's kind of a neat pick, a big physical, right? And then Wanya Morris, I like that. So yeah, there's a lot of players I like here. Let's see. Do I see a halfback? You got a fullback there. Maybe I'd want to see a halfback in there somewhere. But aside from that, I think it's pretty good. Jordan P really likes those first 4 picks. And yeah, those first 4 picks are really good. Yeah. Agent 47 saying, I think any quarterback that we get on this draft will have a perfect situation with, Gannon's defense. Yeah, and I've said something like this before. Like, when it comes to, like, there's a couple positions. I think offensive line and then cornerback. Like, I know who I like in those positions more or less, but whoever, like, what's going to end up happening is Jonathan Gannon's going to identify some cornerbacks he likes, and whoever he takes, I'm going to trust that they're going to be a good fit. And when it comes to offensive linemen, I think with Monty Austinfort, whoever he's going to identify, it might not be the guys I think he would take, but whoever he's going to identify, I'm going to trust they're going to be good players because of the history there. Granddad are saying fullback. Yeah, we've had a few people go with fullbacks once in a while because, we don't really have fullback on the roster, and, maybe they're going to bring one in with the change of offense. We'll see. Right. So yeah. Jordan P saying front four dictates coverage anyway. Build defensive line cornerbacks will look a lot better, especially in a zone scheme. There you go. So overall, Chris, this is a good mock. Maybe I'd like to see a halfback there, but there we go. Let's see. Because if you're saying I'm open to trading back as far as possible to accumulate more draft capital. I mean, I think there is a limit, but I don't mind trading back a couple times there. But let's see. Robert saying, "Hey Joe, I'm optimistic on this coaching staff ability to draft players. What you say? I agree. I mean, I'm going into this optimistic, but the Eagles had really good talent. People talk about look at what good talent they had, but they had to develop that talent. And that defense did get better under Gannon after in his over the 2 years he was there. I think they're bringing in a lot of young coaches who are I think are energetic and hopefully are smart and going to be good teachers. So I'm optimistic. They have to prove it, but I'm optimistic, right? And I think they're coming in with that intention. So yeah. So all right. Overall, nice mock, Chris. Hiding out now. All right. He's got a couple trade backs. So we got multiple trade backs to get a bunch of different picks. He's got the Titans trade at 11 that we've seen a lot tonight. So he went at 11. He went with Christian Gonzalez like that. I think hopefully one of those two cornerbacks is there, right? Then Mazi Smith at 37. So got nice interior defensive line. Then edge, Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame. So that's a nice player there. So you went edge a little bit later there. Then Luke Whippler, we love him, right, as a center there. DJ Turner. So you got two cornerbacks there, right? Gonzalez and Turner, right? So add some depth there. Blake Freeland, the tackle out of BYU we talked about earlier. So developmental tackle, guy who could be starting the year too. And has some really nice physical tools. Then we got A.T. Perry. We love Perry, right? Israel Abanikanda, halfback, running back out of Pittsburgh. That's a really interesting guy. I know, Brett Coleman was talking about him a while back, and as a running back, he's a really good fit, I think, for the wide zone from what they were saying about him. So that's a guy I think is intriguing as a running back fit for the Cardinals. So I really like that. Carl Brooks, we talked about him out of Bowling Green, like that versatile defensive lineman. Andrew Voorhees, a lot of people are taking him and redshirting him. Andre Ishavis, I'm probably butchering it, out of Princeton, big receiver. He's an intriguing prospect. Yaya Diaby, Kyle had him on his, so getting a developmental edge later. Then quarterback Max Duggan out of TCU, so you've got a kind of that day 3 quarterback there. Jonah Tavai, offensive lineman out of defensive lineman, I'm sorry, out of San Diego State. I know Kyle would appreciate that. Another San Diego State player. Then Anthony Orji, linebacker out of Vanderbilt. And Malasala Amove Laulu, I probably butchered that, but offensive tackle out of Oregon. So developmental tackle late, right? So a lot of players there, some new names there. But I like a couple of these guys a lot. I mean, I love the Perry pick. I think Abanikanda is really interesting. Brooks. So overall, I like this. Maybe there's a few players that go a little bit differently, but I like it a lot, right? Let's see. I'm with you. I think, Joe, Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon have a chance to be available on them. I think one of them has a good chance to be there. For which one we'll see, right? Yeah. This is what we got a whole new team draft, right? Yeah. 7 picks in the top 100 is crazy. I mean, that's quite a bit of maneuvering, right? So definitely like that, right? So yeah, nice mock there. Okay. We now have Era 8, who was in here before. That was Morris Legacy. Pretty straightforward mock here. We got Will Anderson, number 3. Obviously, you like that. DeJuan Jones, very popular pick to be the right tackle at 34. Big physical offensive tackle. Then we got Cedric Tillman, receiver out of Tennessee. He's shown up in a couple mocks tonight. Kind of a physical receiver. I don't think he's not a speed receiver so much. I think he ran in the 4.5s, but that's fine for a big receiver. Tyreek Stevenson, a cornerback, fallen to 96. That's a nice spot to get him. I think he usually goes earlier, but so you get a guy who could be a starter for you potentially. Eric Gray, running back out of Oklahoma. So you add some running back there. We like to see that. Dylan Horton, edge out of TCU. So getting a developmental edge player. Then an interior defensive lineman, DJ Dale out of Alabama, like that. And then Chandler Zavala at pick 213. That's really good value. Moore's Legacy, say not sure how to trade in the other simulators for the most part. I know some of them you can't offer the trades. They propose them. So get in there and practice with it, and you might, you have to kind of figure out the format. Sometimes the interfaces are a little different, but when your pick comes up, they usually tell you, I think on this one, if there's some offers, and you can either choose to accept them or reject them. But you can't propose the trades the same way you can in some others, I think. But Will Anderson, we love that. DeJuan Jones, good player. I'm not going that pick here. I think there's other positions that are more important than tackle, in my opinion. There's other tackles I like as a better fit, but I know it's a very popular pick by a lot of people. I'm intrigued by the Tillman pick, though, that big receiver. Love the Tyreek Stevenson pick, especially that late. I think that's really nice. Obviously, the Chandlers of also. There's some nice picks here. Maybe a few things for me, I would do differently, but yeah, that Stevenson and Zavala pick there in particular, getting that late is really nice. So, all right. And there we have it. I thought we'd have a short show, but we still were over 2 hours. So, all right, everyone. Thank you for all the mock drafts. Thank you for being here for Mock Draft Monday. I want to obviously thanks to Kyle Ledbetter, who was here with us earlier, hanging out. I appreciate you all for bearing with me. It's been a long week for me. If you didn't hear, I woke up in Texas this morning and had to travel home. So let's see a couple other comments here real quick. Chris, thanks for being here. I heard Van Ness could be a bust due to his ability to bend and move. I mean, any player could be a bust, but I think he has only kind of one move right now. He's kind of a power rusher, but I think he's going to be more of an interior rusher. So I don't know that. We'll see. I mean, I like him. I think he's just a little more of a power rusher. So I don't know that that's as much of an issue, but I think the comp with him for some people was like Justin Smith, who was a really good player on the interior, but we'll see, right? We'll have to see how it plays out, right? So, all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put up the shout outs to our channel members. We got a few of you in here now, including Chris Smith. So I thank you all for your support. And I appreciate everything that everyone has done in terms of mock drafts, submitting them. So thank you all for everything. I'm going to put up the channel shout outs and get our theme song on the way out here. And we're going to get out of here. Have a good night, everyone. Peace.